Lydia Gray, those skin tissues. You will find those skin tissues finer, softer, stronger, more absorbent. Those skin tissues best for you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to my study. This is Eloise McElhone representing those so gentle doe-skin cleansing tissues. And my guest this week really leads a double life. He not only is the originator of Life Begins at 80 and also Juvenile Jury, but he himself is the very talented and charming MC, Mr. Jack Barry. And with Jack today, we have one of his very tiniest juvenile jurors, Miss Alberta Fitterer. And we're going to talk to both of them in just a moment. Right now, I saw a very cute thing the other day, a quote about Miss Andrea Meade Lawrence, who has done such wonderful things in the Olympics recently. And it says that she had put romance into the ski run. When asked how this worked out, how she made such tremendous speed, she said, well, her husband was waiting for her at the end of the run with open arms. And so she said, to get to him, I just speed up like the very devil. Well, I saw a picture of her husband, and I don't blame the gal at all. Right now, I'd like to take you to another young man. I don't know whether he'll be waiting with open arms or not. I hope so. The originator of Juvenile Jury and Life Begins at 80, Jack Barry.
All right,
with open arms. Hi,
nice
Jack.
to see you. Almost
Very
over.
nice to see you here. Hey, do you ever get so a little confused with this trip to the octogenarians and then the adolescents and then back again?
Well, it confuses us a little bit, but in a way, both of the programs complement each other. Actually, Juvenile Jury was nothing more or less than the forerunner for Life Begins at 80.
Oh, really? You mean in this case the child was father to the grandpa?
Well, I guess you could say something like that, but actually it was during the rehearsals of Juvenile Jury that my partner Dan Enright and I suddenly realized that if this rather unique age group, the youngsters, could be entertaining and popular to people in the television and radio audiences, that we'd go to the other extreme, so we went as far as we could go and devised a program with people over 80 called Life Begins at 80.
Well, you definitely had a point there. I think everybody sort of loves to see Grandma kick over the traces, especially Grandma. But that's really how it started? I mean, it's like
that plus, of course, a little research here and there, and we found some rather amazing facts, things which I think will rather astound you, too, and they astonish almost everyone I tell it to. The fact that in this country alone, there are over 1 million people who are past 80 years of age. And in addition to that, between the ages of 65 and 80, there are more than 15 million people. Well, the only thing that bothered us then was whether or not a program featuring these older people would appeal to the younger element.
Well, I think you have definitely proved that it appealed very definitely the younger element. I think it's terrific. I think it gave us a whole new slant on the oldsters. that they were still fun and had a sense of humor and were just as clever as they ever were. I think maybe we should give you an Oscar with a long beard on it, Jack. Tell me, talking about the oldsters, who's the oldest person that was ever on the show?
Well, there have been so many. I think the oldest, I'm not absolutely sure, but I think the oldest was a woman. She was a former slave. Her name was Mrs. Mary Galloway, and at the time she appeared on the program, which was some 3 years ago, she was 104 years old.
Ooh.
And I think more astonishing even than her age was the fact that when she came up to the studio, she came up in a cab, and the cab pulled up to the curb about 6 or 8 inches away, and instead of waiting for some kindly gent to help her out of the cab, she opened the door and she leaped from the cab out to the curb at 104 years of age.
Ooh, that is some leaping. I hope I'm in such a good shape at 104,
You
Jack.
should hope you're in such good shape even now.
You're right. Say, another very active member of your panel, I remember, was Bernard McFadden. Suddenly he got up and stood on his head right in the middle of the program.
Yeah, he's pretty incredible gent. That was right after he had made that first highly publicized parachute jump. And he came on the program and demonstrated his agility and ability, and he stood on his head. We've had a conversation recently, and he's going to make another parachute jump when he's 85.
Oh, no.
And he's asked me to jump with him.
Are you going to?
Well, I'm a little leery and pretty apprehensive about the whole thing, but I have made this proposition to him. I told him that I would jump on my 85th birthday if he jumps with me.
Well, that's a good idea. I tell you what, I'll jump with you on my 85th and we'll make it a threesome.
Oh, that'll be jolly.
Quite something. Say, what do you do in a case, though, Jack, if any of your suddenly oldsters come down with, well, certainly not measles or mumps, but some indisposition just before you go on the air?
Well, I know this is going to sound like a fabrication, but because everyone kind of associates illness with old age, but actually, in the 3 or 4 years that we've been on the air, we've never had a cancellation or a disappointment because of illness or sickness. And actually, we're not too worried about it because a few doors down from the studio, there's an old former minstrel man who's a doorman at a restaurant, and he's volunteered to substitute anytime we happen to need a substitute.
Oh, well, I would say that was a very handy replacement
Sure
indeed.
is, sure is.
Tell you about old performers. Let's see, there are a couple of others that are kind of
Yeah.
ex-performers.
Uh-huh.
I remember Lorna Standish was
Yeah,
a dancer,
she
wasn't
was.
she? And then that darling Mrs. Carhart. She was an opera and concert singer.
Sure
I
was.
just love her. I think she's just wonderful.
Well, the feeling is mutual. She feels the same way about you. People may have told you about this, that very often she refers to herself on the program as the Eloise McElhone of the middle 80s.
Oh, well, that is very nice indeed. I love that remark she made at one point, talking about the good old days,
Yeah.
buggy riding, and she said, I held the horses, and the man held me.
Well, like Jimmy Durante, she's got a million of them. She, of course, has a lot of old adages about marriage. She often refers to herself about marriage. She said that she's just like a grasshopper. She'd jump at the first opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
She's only 85.
Yeah, well, that isn't bad advice. Say, aside from your busy schedule of Life Begins at 80 and Juvenile Jury, what do you do in your spare time? Have you got anything else on the fire?
Well, Dan Enright, my partner, and I have a production firm, and we're constantly trying to whip up new ideas. We've got one cooking right now that we hope will be entertaining television audiences soon, called The People's Choice.
Oh, well, an election year. I said it was an appropriate title. What's it about?
Well, you were very, very sage to guess that, Eloise. It does actually concern, it's a little bit apropos during election year because it features congressmen, senators, and representatives bringing to one central program talented people from their home state in a big nationwide talent contest.
Oh, say, that really does sound interesting. Don't you think you're making it a little hard, though, on the congressmen?
What do you
First,
mean?
they had to give free seeds to get votes, then they kissed babies. Now they're going to have to get you on television. This is going to end up, instead of being between Harry and Ike, the race is going to be between Milton Berle and Arthur Godfrey.
Well, that'll be a good race.
Fine, well, I'm going to give you a chance to not race, but sit down and rest a minute, Jack,
Thank you.
while I do a little discussing, I should say. I'm having a difficult time here, election year, and know of a favorite subject of mine, and that is doe-skin cleansing tissues. You know, I think you've probably heard me very often say how wonderful doe-skin tissues are if you happen to have a cold, because they're so gentle, and yet they're soft and absorbent. They won't irritate your tender nose. Well, I found a picture here. This is a real George picture of a nose, and I want you to take a look at it. I do hope that none of us ever have noses that look like that, but I think when you often have a cold, you feel that they look like that. And that's what's marvelous about doe-skin tissues, because it wouldn't even irritate a nose like that. And doe-skin tissues won't irritate your budget either. If you get our big economy box, you get 400. Not 300 like most other leading brands, but 400 of the finest quality tissues. That's an extra 100 tissues in every box. And because they're strong and absorbent as well as so soft, that means they're perfect for taking off makeup and for every handkerchief use you can think of. So why don't you get one of these boxes? Keep them handy everywhere, in the kitchen, in the bathroom, in the glove compartment of your car. And also, of course, remember to keep a good, handy amount in your pocketbook and also in the children's pockets when you send them off to school. Remember, you can get doe-skin tissues everywhere at your leading chain or neighborhood independent stores, grocery stores, drugstores, variety, and department stores. So remember the name doe-skin. You'll never forget the quality. And now I'd like to take you back to our guest today, who is, again, the originator of Life Begins at 80 and also Juvenile Jury. Say, talking a little bit about the jury, that really is a program where the unexpected happens.
Yeah, well, there's just absolutely no way of predicting what children are going to do. They do the most unexpected things, and it's not necessarily have to be on a radio or television program either. As an example of that, I remember the time that we were down at the National Press Club in Washington, and the kids did some of the most unpredictable things.
Oh, I seem to say I remember a few headlines about that. Weren't the President and Margaret Truman there?
I don't know if there were headlines, but there were quite some newspaper stories about it. Yes, President Truman and Margaret Truman were both there. It was a father and daughter banquet, and the kids and I had been invited down to entertain. And I'll never forget, the National Press Club was a great, big, long hall, and hundreds of people were there. And as the curtain opened, all you could hear was one piping voice coming out and saying, "Hey, Jack, which guy is the president?"
Fine.
And a little bit later on, President Truman and Margaret asked that they be allowed to come back and spend a little time with the youngsters, which, of course, we were delighted to see them personally and be introduced to them. And when they came back, this was just about the time that Margaret Truman was the center of all the controversy as to whether or not she had a good singing voice or not. And on our panel is a youngster, Billy Knight, whose daddy is Felix Knight of the Metropolitan Opera Company. And as Margaret Truman walked into this little back dressing room, Billy Knight ran up to her and said, "Miss Truman, if you really want to learn how to sing, all you got to do is ask my daddy. He'll teach you." It was a little embarrassing, but she accepted it very graciously.
I hear she always does. I was going to say, that's advice, really, from the small fry. But they give out with some pretty sensational advice
Sure
every
do.
program. You know, I call up your staff and ask them to send me some questions that you'd had on the show. I said, send me really the best ones. Now, I'm going to read them here from these cards, but you have to sort of jog your memory to remember the answers.
Well, that'll be difficult, but I think I can remember some of the good ones.
Some of these are really marvelous. The first one is, I am the mother of a thirsty little girl who keeps me up, spending the night getting water for her. What shall I do?
Yeah, I remember one. I mean, they gave so many answers, but I remember one that will always stick with me. One of the youngsters said, well, why don't you have the child sleep in a bathtub? Accomplish both purposes.
I would say that is quite an answer there. The second one is, I don't know what to do with my son. Every time I send him on an errand, he gets lost.
Yeah, well, the best answer to that was given by Dickie Orland, who's a fellow, he's pretty about 11 years old now, but at the time he was only 8, and he used to read all the magazines and joke books and things, and he said, don't worry about your son getting lost. Look what happened to Christopher Columbus when he got lost.
A definite point there, I would say,
Oh,
Mr.
this is a pretty
Barrett.
sharp boy.
And this one, and this is a problem a lot of people must have. We have trouble with our babysitter. Every time we leave her alone with our baby, she eats everything in the icebox.
Well, Charlie Hankinson came up with an answer that I thought was the best to that. He said the thing to do to remedy this situation is to keep only canned foods in the icebox, and when you go to the movies, take the can opener with you.
Well, I say that would be very good indeed. The can opener, nothing can happen at home.
Right.
Well, of course, we could go on like this forever. I've got a lot more questions, but I think it's about time we meet one of your juvenile jurors in person.
Good.
And that is a very charming young lady. I see her over there now, Miss Alberta Fitterer.
Hi, Alberta.
Hello,
Come on here.
Alberta.
Say hello to Eloise McElhone.
Hello, Eloise McElhone.
Well, hello, Alberta Fitterer.
How old are you, Alberta? 4.5?
Yes.
Well, for goodness sake,
Well,
I know
that's
Eloise has a
really-
lot of questions she wants to ask you.
I sure do. Tell me, how old would you like to be, Alberta?
I'm satisfied with my age.
You are. You know, she's the first girl I've ever heard say that, Jack.
If you were 4.5, you would say it too.
Well, that's entirely possible. Tell me, do you like television and the movies, Alberta?
Yes.
Who's your favorite in the movies?
Esther.
Esther Williams. Oh, doesn't she swim beautifully? And who's your favorite? Who's your favorite
Oh,
guy?
she swims?
Yes, she does. Oh, Clark Gable.
Clark Gable. Well, you know, you're in there with a lot of the girls. They kind of like him too.
I know.
You comfortable, Alberta?
Yes, I am.
You're kind of squeezed in. We've kind of made you a little sandwich here between Jack Barry and me. Tell me, do you get a lot of? It's a lot of fun when you're on juvenile jury,
I
isn't
know.
it? Do you like answering the problems that the other
Yeah.
children send in? You like to sort of help them out.
Alberta, what do you want to be when you get older?
Doctor.
Why?
I like to entertain people.
You like to entertain people. I'd say she does a very good job of it right now.
Well, she always does on juvenile jury. We'll say that for her.
Is this a new dress you have on today?
Yes, it is.
That's a very pretty dress that your mommy
I
bought.
Is
you.
that Seal Chapman or something?
No, it's not. It's a purple dress.
Oh,
Oh, it's
purple,
a
yeah.
purple dress. Tell me, have you got any pets at home, Alberta?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
But I would like to have one.
You would? Well, I tell you, we're going to give you a little pet to take home with you right now. This is our little Dottie Doe Award for being such a nice girl and coming to visit us today. And
Thank you.
also, would you hand this over to Jack Barry? That's his little
Thank
Dottie
you.
Doe for being with us, too.
They're cute, aren't they?
And I want to thank you both very much, and I hope you'll come and visit me again.
Well, thank you for inviting us, Eloise.
Thank
We're
you,
very happy to
Jack
be here.
Barry, and thank you, Alberta.
You're welcome very much.
How are you?
And now we're going to salute some stars in your neighborhood.